Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to Yu-Gi-Oh! And video game news. Today is Monday, April 3rd, so it's going to be a little awkward going through the news today because over the weekend, near the ending of the Friday stream, we were running into April Fool's Day announcements. So bear with me as we try to avoid any announcements that would be actually just April Fool's Day things that aren't really real. On top of that, there's yet another emergency. I'd say this is probably closer to a medium emergency that at any point, for any reason, could pull me away from a stream or cause me not to stream. So apologies if in the next few weeks, hopefully it's only in the next few days, there would be some disruption to the standard streaming schedule. Also, today should be the first day that the 4 p.m. time slot as far as YouTube Shorts happens. So you could get one more YouTube Short at 4 p.m. Try and break those up a little bit more. I'm inherently running into some problems there where the YouTube studio only allows me to upload somewhere around 75 videos per day, regardless of the fact if they're shorts and they're only 1 minute, because 75 minutes is basically nothing compared to what they allow as far as just long 5-hour long live streams and things like that. So after Friday, I tried to upload things and got so far, but then got stopped, and it's just going to constantly be a problem because I also have to upload pre-recorded footage, and I have to potentially try and upload and schedule more footage in general. Like, I really, despite my own intentions, this channel is becoming overrun by YouTube Shorts. And the only thing that would really fix that is if I just started curating a lot of the YouTube Shorts down, and it would almost come down to randomness. What I could do is I could make a YouTube Short that was only 30 seconds long, and then another YouTube Short that's only 30 seconds long, and then merge them together into one YouTube Short. So there's an A game and a B game. Inherently, that means most people would only see the A game and never stick with the short for the full minute to see the B game. And you could certainly expand that general idea further and further. I did play this dual trial competition off screen, thank goodness. It got me this pack, which got me some cards. Yep. Let's see, we can see if we could possibly highlight somewhat of what we got here, although it doesn't, there really wouldn't be a full explanation. And if anything, I could just go buy this pack some more if I wanted to. I don't think it's particularly the best candidate to do that. So at the moment we have like 2 ended events and a new month where we're back down to silver 5. Suppose it is somewhat worth checking out just to be certain that we're willing to skip buying any more packs from this source. I mean, it really wouldn't hurt to probably do about 10 packs here on that. And just hope, because that's really what's going to boil down to, is the hope would be high that you wouldn't waste your money or unlock a secret pack that then is high in demand. Alright, let's do this. The same could be true. Okay, so we got an ultra rare here, good. That sets us up nicely. super rare will give us a key to unlock things. So for the accountability section today, there's not a lot. Well, there's a lot to say, but not a lot of progress as far as getting stuff scheduled or making pre-recorded footage. I finished Prey Moon Crash. That made a good opportunity to take a break of some sort. And then my neighbor's AT&T was being installed, which it broke my internet connection enough to highlight that my network time protocol setup was no longer working. So I'm hoping I fixed that, but I'm not sure I really did. And ironically, it was like so broken on how it was set up that it was 30 minutes off. If something was an hour off, then I could imagine it would have been just poorly programmed to try to accommodate for daylight savings time, which you don't do in network time protocol. The signal is always sent from the Linux epoch, so it's a number of seconds after like 1970, January 1st, 1970 or something like that. Some date, some artificial date created, number of seconds that have expired past that, or milliseconds more accurately. But yeah, if somebody had messed up their time server and I was getting the wrong data because they programmed it at the wrong hour, that would kind of make sense. But to be 30 minutes off, that's just broken. I mean, there's no reason why it would ever be 30 minutes off. But that may very well have been my own issue. Inherently, that is part of the problem too here, is that with my smart home equipment, is it all needs to call home so desperately that it breaks when it can't call home to or connect to the internet. So we opened 5 different secret packs here. Alright, with that, we're probably in a better position. But noticeably, there are just like some normal cards here that we don't have 3 copies of, or even 1 copy of, and that's more in line with what I was trying to have happen. Now, I guess arguably you shouldn't take any of these packs as an idea, unless you run into one that very specifically has like no cards at all that you've ever collected, or it very specifically has 1 card you really want. So yeah, my internet was messed up. It's messed up my smart home stuff, which creates this whole problem. I think particularly Zigbee is just becoming more and more appealing as a concept. In all fairness, it's mostly messing up my light bulbs though, so it may just be those light bulbs in particular are just poor quality. See, this one might be a good candidate to go with. We'll think about that. But yeah, because my internet was down and I just assumed it was completely AT&T's fault when it was only partially AT&T's fault, I started doing a Lego set, the Lego Foosball Lego Ideas set in particular. And I have to say that it is a very interesting set, but of the about 2,000 pieces, I would say about 1,500 of them are focused around building the frame of the foosball table, and it's not particularly that appealing to build that. It's a lot of very old-fashioned, these are Lego bricks, type builds where everything is really kind of bricky. We're looking for an ultra rare here, otherwise I'm gonna have to open another 10 pack of this, and then that'll be the end of my crystals, and I hope that doesn't turn into a giant mistake. I would kind of highly recommend the foosball set, particularly if you can get it at a more reasonable price than they were really charging. If I recall correctly, the LEGO Ideas foosball set was severely modified from the LEGO Ideas proposal to make it smaller and not really a full foosball table. Generally, you have 6 or 8 sticks that you control on a foosball table versus your opponent having 6 or 8 sticks. There's seems to be about 2 sticks you control that you can spin the little figurines to kick the foosball around in the foosball set. So it's a model of a foosball set that happens to be playable somewhat, but not really that playable, and definitely not going to give you a good experience. And as an adult LEGO fan, I don't really play with playsets, so the idea of putting any playability in in what it was a really expensive, really adult set is kind of silly. And they really haven't done that with any of the other sets. And then the idea that they've set prices and set piece numbers, and that's one of the things that I think is kind of sometimes poorly run at LEGO, is just that it feels like there is an accounting department that runs LEGO sometimes, and they are just ever increasing the prices of sets. And I don't know if they're a public company, but it certainly feels like they're acting like a public company, just constantly trying to get more and more profits. You do get a massive amount of figurines. They try to make up with the fact that the price was too high by adding a ton of very varied figurines in the foosball set, but that in itself creates this weird problem. It almost proposes this whole new system that would be great for LEGO, but also would be kind of annoying in that for every character you get a male and a female head, and you get a male or female hairstyles, with the hairstyles being somewhat non-gendered enough that if you put a female hairstyle on a male character, it still kind of seems like it mostly works. There's only a couple of hairstyles in the whole set that just scream this could only be on a female's head. In fact, it's almost quite magical as to the way it breaks down like that, and that there's multi-gendered. Right, I guess we'll do 10 here. But if we do 10 here, we wouldn't have enough to get any more. We'll just stop here, out of an abundance of caution. So yeah, it's a great idea to say here's two heads, a male and female head, all with different faces. Now they're not 100% consistent on it, because there's definitely a couple of male heads that don't have a secondary expression on the back of the head, because they've made these male haircuts extremely short and they don't cover the back of the head on a couple of the characters, 2 out of maybe a dozen. But you end up with twice as many heads as you do bodies. So now I have just entire collection of over a dozen interesting LEGO figure heads that I don't know what to do with. Plus, in the foosball set, they're using the human flesh tone colors instead of the old-fashioned Lego minifig yellow, which, even if you were to start to replace those extra heads on older sets with the, like, a default, I'm sure I have plenty of minifigs that have like default expressions that I could change up, but their yellow hands would just kind of imply that they all have yellow gloves on, which in that brings me to the next complaint there in the foosball set, is that they've come up with 4 different flesh tones. So you have white person, pale white person, tanned white person, you have a mulatto, light-skinned black person, and then you have a chocolate dark black person. And for each of the bodies, the hands match those colors. So you really can't mix and match as much as you would want. Particularly since they're all wearing soccer uniforms for the foosball table. It would have made a lot of sense if they just all had the blue uniform characters had blue gloves on them, and then the red uniform characters had red gloves on their hand, to address that better. But yeah, overall, I would have preferred if they had knocked $100 off the price of the foosball table a year later, and maybe they will do this, and they had just given me the soccer field green base plates, which are about 6 pieces, fairly large Lego pieces as far as base plates, but not super large, and then a collection of characters, and just let me create a soccer field on the grass with soccer players. If the price of the foosball table was cheaper, I'd say it would make a lot of sense to buy a second Lego foosball table set and just make a soccer field on a base plate for Lego City and get away from the foosball table concept. Because the real artistic value there is in the minifigs. They failed horribly, in my opinion, to actually make a playable foosball. And inevitably, if you were a kid and your parents got your Lego foosball set, you would just be moving a step up very quickly to wanting a real foosball table. It's almost like buying one of those mini foosball tables they sometimes sell, where it's at a weird height where a 5 or 6 year old would play it. If you buy something like that and that becomes a huge hit in your family, you're going to inevitably, almost certainly, end up rebuying the exact same idea later on to get a full-sized foosball table. Lego has been pretty bad around the Lego idea set concept, and I haven't been paying enough attention, but I think they're probably trying to wind down that idea anyways, that they're not like super enthusiastic around the idea of getting feedback or suggestions from creators. Inherently, it probably feels very much like a case. Wow, this one is close to death already. You know what, I could have probably won this turn. too late now, but yeah, there was enough to have summoned another character and won this turn. Yeah, Legos made too many sets. They've all been too expensive. And I could see them taking that feedback and saying, oh, we've made too many sets. Let's get rid of the Lego ideas concept and only focus on their concept. Also, while there was a lot of complaints around the Lego Friends sets when they originally come out, the new announcements for Lego Friends sets do sound like they make a lot of sense and do kind of feel like they are going in a better direction. So, begrudgingly, then you have to kind of admit that now Lego, instead of being focused on one type of sets, has focuses in multiple different sets, and it's hard to say I personally want to see any of them go away. Like, I could see the Nintendo sets go away because those are pretty awful looking, and I'm not sure they sell particularly well. The Nintendo sets, meaning the play sets that with the electronic brickhead Mario. But yeah, the Lego Friends set seems like it's going in a kind of great direction, and that they're putting a lot of thought and concept into it. And in a lot of ways, the Lego Friends now feels like this is a modern take on a Barbie's Dream House concept, by having named characters and groups of friends, and the characters having personalities and backstories, all of which really don't exist in the original Lego sets that were mostly targeted at the boys. And honestly, if you bought a boy a Lego Friends set, it wouldn't feel too girly, per se. I assume the Monkey Kid series is dead. The Ninjago series probably has a couple of things. But mostly Lego's still just making a lot of random stuff. And they're just making too much in general, that to the point where it's, over the past year or two, cannibalized its own sales. So yeah, it's no surprise that potentially the Lego Ideas set would get less focus on them. They've also gone in some blatantly insane ideas too, like the Eiffel Tower giant set was a ridiculous idea. Like, that had to have taken up a lot of production resources as far as pieces go. The Titanic ship is another example. This idea that almost every year they're trying to come out with a even bigger, in some way, whether it's height or width or just number of pieces or just more expensive sets, is ridiculous. Like, when I was first indoctrinated, is probably the right term, into being kind of into Lego sets, it was the Lego Death Star that was the biggest set that you could reasonably buy for years before I started doing Lego, and years after I started doing Lego. I don't know why I did that. That was dumb. So, and it definitely felt like when I started doing Lego that the Lego Death Star playset, which that was a playset too. I'm kind of glad I never got that, because honestly, it just would not have fitted around a lot of things. Although I do have a Millennium Falcon that also just sits on the shelf. That is the thing about the foosball table too, is that it is definitely more of a model that's going to be on a separate shelf than what the Lego Cities builds are. And so I am splitting resources here between getting models of things and things that actually could fit in the Lego city. But yeah, it almost really should have been a case where the foosball set itself was one piece, and then the starter soccer team set was a separate piece, because I could see that working very well. It was, I think the foosball set was about $260, $280, rather expensive for what it was. Had it been reduced in half of that, where it's $125, sounds like a good price, just for the foosball pieces, and with that you get soccer green base plates, but you don't get any minifigs at all, and then the piece count is maybe a little bit lower, although I don't know how they could have really made the piece count much lower around the actual framing of the foosball table. And then you had potentially an overpriced set of minifig characters to buy separately if you didn't already have minifig characters from other sets that you wanted to put in the foosball table. Because there really is that possibility there, where you could just put any minifig character you have playing soccer, even though it visually wouldn't look as good or make as much sense. But honestly, even at that, I think you probably just lose the foosball table aspect, and this really should have just been soccer team, the set. Unless they were going to really step it up. Which even at that would have been a tough decision to make had they made a fully functional foosball table. Something that was the right size and the right number of pieces as far as spinning rods, and hadn't been scaled down so severely. Then keeping it at the same price potentially makes some sense, even without the minifig characters. But none of it really quite makes the most sense, because you probably could get a real foosball set for less than $500, and you're halfway there with this fictional scaled down Lego one. Yeah. It really probably should have just been something that wasn't approved in the first place. As cruel as that sounds, as far as the Lego Ideas concept, it shouldn't have been approved if they were not willing to potentially take a massive loss on it, which is probably what they should have just done. Yeah, obviously it got 10,000 votes on Lego Ideas, so it was popular amongst Lego fans who vote on Lego Ideas. But Lego themselves should have probably just said, we're not going to approve this until we can think it through some more. Anyway, so that's what I've been doing over the weekend as far as the accountability section. It's not a lot. I've been doing Legos. I started watching the Netflix remake of Shaman King. Inherently, I did not watch Shaman King on Fox Kids or whatever when it came out. It looked like a weird cartoon that didn't... and I was just not watching cartoons when it came out. I'm sure I was probably a little too old or just busy doing something else. So watching the remake is about as dumb as trying to watch new Rydo for the first time in my adult age. That being said, I only got a couple episodes into Shaman King, and then I skipped to the last couple episodes, and it just doesn't make any sense. It definitely seems like it is basically a fighting anime based on a fighting Shonen Jump manga that I don't think has much of a concept beyond that. Visually, it seems like it's all over the place, and it just introduces insane numbers of people. And mostly, I would say I just don't like the art style. It's a weird art style, to say the least. I'm glad it was kind of unique to that one show or that one animator. And it probably plays a little bit better in smaller panels in a Shonen Jump or just in a manga format. Making the characters skinnier and shorter makes a lot more sense there, but yeah, in animated form, it's really, really short. It's not even something that I would say is in line with what you normally would assume the moe art style is. It's too skinny even for that. And so the art threw me off, and then the lack of it setting itself up, I think, particularly well to explain what's going on, or the just inconsistency. Now, inherently, I have to admit that it is obviously a cartoon for probably 10-year-olds or younger. So it's no surprise that it doesn't really appeal to me. That being said, I would say Naruto was much more watchable and relatable. I actually did sit through almost every episode of Naruto, the original Naruto series, even though the vast majority of that is filler arc garbage that doesn't matter. Well, I was only able to sit through 2 or 4 episodes or so of Shaman King, so wasted a little bit of time there, but not that much time. And then, yeah, just generally watching too much TV. But I'm not going to complain too much about it, because I do need a little bit of a cooling off period after playing both Prey and Prey Moon Crash, and I need to schedule things, and it is difficult, to say the least, to motivate myself to schedule things. Let's see. The ultimate problem here would be if I try to destroy this character and it doesn't work. Which that does seem like that's exactly what's happening here. Is it either this character or this character? Like, I should be able to special summon more things, and yet the game is actively stopping me from doing that. And I should be able to activate this, and yet the game. But the descriptions here don't say anything like that. So I don't understand why, like, it doesn't even seem to say there's any influence, so why can I not summon these cards, and why can I not activate this ability? Yeah, I have no idea why I am not succeeding here. What card was played? Which, that's a prime example of the problem with something like Yu-Gi-Oh! Or any collectible card game, is that if in that instance you can't figure out why something is not working, it's just going to leave the player confused. And see, me stopping this card from doing its effect probably isn't going to help me much. If anything, I may just lose this turn. Alright. I guess some video game stores may have Easter sales. That's certainly a way to go. I don't think too many people are going to complain about one extra sale, even if you happen not to celebrate Easter. Atelier Riser 3 has its first DLC, which is swimsuit wear, which I guess the timing may be right on that. Or, you know, certainly it is probably the first thing a lot of fans would want as far as custom costumes around everything around these characters, and particularly the main female protagonist. That being said, she was always kind of worshipped for having thick thighs, and I'm not sure the screenshot in the swimwear does her the best justice on that. It's alright. When you look at the other girls, they have much thinner thighs. Meanwhile, I'm looking at swimsuits and not paying attention enough to play the game, which, yeah. It's not like I was going to win there anyways. Also, new photo frames and poses have been added to the special photo mode as far as Atelier Riser 3. See if there's any other news before we start covering over the other news. Yeah, a whole bunch of tweets popped up just as I was about to cover the news. The Street Fighter film and TV rights have been acquired by Legendary. It's going to work with Capcom on future adaptations of the fighting game series. This is from Video Games Chronicles as a news story. That being said, the last time a Street Fighter movie or TV show was made, There's someone on the chat called the Great Lord 123, and he says hi and then hi times 2. Sorry, I didn't respond to you. I did see your hi, but I just got distracted. But also, please stop typing in hi, or I'm gonna time you out. Like, put something more substantial than that if you're gonna type in the chat after the first hi. As far as the Street Fighter, let's see. There's the Jean-Claude Van Damme in 1994. There was Street Fighter Legend of Chun-Li in 2009, which I think was in the anime Street Fighter. And I think that's pretty much it as far as Street Fighter movies and TVs. And the Street Fighter anime is kind of beloved, perhaps not for any real legitimate let's see. Lost my train of thought there. Yeah, the Street Fighter anime I think is kind of beloved for being its own standalone thing. I don't think it really has too much to do with the fact that it's based on Street Fighter, and I think it has a lot more to do with the fact that it has a steamy shower scene, I believe, with this character, Chun-Li, in the anime, and it came out around the time when a lot of people would have been going through puberty at the time to see that steamy shower scene. I think the shower scene devolves into a fight. So yeah, and you also have to remember that in 2009 or so, the internet and seeing even steamy shower scenes were an extreme rarity. We've completely lost that in TV and movies these days because there's just no reason to not censor things and make things family friendly. Because the extra going in the opposite direction is not very helpful for getting things published or getting more views. It wasn't until pretty much Game of Thrones and HBO that we started to see a couple of shows like Game of Thrones, Euphoria, go heavy into trying to use sex to sell once again as far as TV and movies. But specifically movies, almost none of them have any nudity or shower scenes or anything like that. They come out in movie theaters, and outside of extended cable, almost nothing has anything like that. Which, ironically, when you're talking about the Street Fighter anime, the Jean-Claude movie is just a early 90s garbage movie, action movie, which there was tons of those, and that has been the history of video game movie adaptations since like the Mario Brothers movies, is that people just don't put any effort into them, or it just doesn't matter. We see with like the most recent Dungeons and Dragons movie, if that turns out to be good, I'll be surprised, because there's at least 2 or 3 bad Dungeons and Dragons movies that very much are like the Street Fighter live action movie. But you would think that a Street Fighter anime in particular would be much more about the fighting and much more remembered about the fighting, but no, that's not what it's remembered for. So now we have Legendary owning the rights to it. Does that really mean anything whenever we talk about TV and film? Not really. it doesn't mean much of anything. There could be exactly 0 movies and TVs that actually get made from this deal. Capcom probably is getting some pay or play type contract licensing deal where they get relatively small amounts of money just so Legendary can say they are working on it and stop anybody else from making a Street Fighter movie. This inherently might be a direct reaction to the Mortal Kombat movies, which are trying or tried to come back and be a thing. And yeah, that might somewhat work too. The most recent Mortal Kombat movies. But I don't even know if fighting movies or action movies are super what people want. So yeah, it's kind of pointless to think too deep on the idea of Capcom licensing out Street Fighter. Inherently, I do feel like Capcom has, while they've heavily relied on Street Fighter to be a cash cow for them, they have been very much one of these Japanese companies that isn't really that interested in doing anything new or great with Street Fighter. And they very possibly painted themselves in a corner in that Street Fighter 2 is still the most popular Street Fighter, I imagine, amongst many people. And Street Fighter 3, 4, and 5 are not held with any level of regard compared to Street Fighter 2, or whatever the best version of Street Fighter 2 would be. But yeah, with every attempt at a new or continuation of the story in Street Fighter 3, 4, and 5, they've not been able to really grab people's attention because fighting games stopped becoming popular enough as soon as arcades disappeared and people stopped going to arcades. And then you are left with just catering to the fighting game fans, the Evo type fans, and I'm not sure they care much about the story or things changing at all as far as fighting games. You definitely have to think about what is the story of any fighting game. Street Fighter in particular, I'm not sure there's that much of a narrative to tell. It's almost certainly just a collection of characters that maybe in their backstories and their endings connects people together a little bit more, but like overall you have people fighting in the street, and I can't tell you much more than that. I don't know if there's any connection between Chun-Li and this guy, or this guy, or this guy, or this guy, or this guy. I can't tell you what canonically is the story with this guy. This guy's basically the main character, and I still couldn't really tell you the main story. Because fighting games in arcades were not designed to tell a narrative, they were designed to take your quarters as quickly as possible, so any cutscenes or narrative would be incredibly short or non-existent in most cases. It's not really a very rich tapestry on which you can weave a movie or a TV series. And I have to throw this out, and this may be a little bit from more ignorance than usual, but I'm not sure that there are just that many fighting people out there. Like the Bruce Lees, the Jackie Chans. Jackie Chan is incredibly old now. Now, inherently, both I think Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan are products of extremely abusive forced training at an extremely young age. That probably shouldn't go on in all reality. And that's why they are so good, is that they have been, like most Olympians, pushed by parents or pushed by some other trainer to spend all their energy and all their life only focusing on doing fighting motions and moves. But even at that, I don't think there's any real up-and-coming fighting actors. And we've never really seen that many fighting actors come from the West outside. Anyways, inherently Hollywood is still hiring people who are in their 60s or 70s and are playing roles that would be much better suited for people in their 20s. And inherently it is definitely accused, I think somewhat fairly, in that most celebrities in Hollywood are not willing to admit their age and grow up and age into slower, less action-y roles. Tom Cruise, I think, is probably a great example of that. Still doing the Mission Impossible movies. I think that's Tom Cruise that does the Mission Impossible movies. So if Legendary were to make a live-action fighting based on Street Fighter, that you're probably just going to see a ton of CGI happening there, or a ton of nameless stunt people doing most of the work. Moving on, this advocacy group in the BAME, I assume that probably is something like, it'd be nice if they spelled it out, but I would assume it's Black Academy of Media and Arts or something. Anyways, they put out on April 1st that the original founding vice chair, Tanya Lade, died. And I have to assume that this is the case and not an April Fool's Day joke, because that would be in incredibly bad taste. Certainly. But yeah, you never know. Almost lost there. Two more cards to bring one more character on the field. Him tossing a card to stop me is not going to really do much. But inherently that does point out the problem of April 1st, April Fool's Day. It really should be a thing that is just a issue that people should. It's another example of where April Fool's Day and April 1st should go away. It doesn't make any sense that, particularly on a permanent format of the internet, that one day out of the year people are highly suspect of lying more than they normally do. Speaking of highly suspect of lying, the United States government has been pushing the idea of banning TikTok and debating that in Congress. Now, immediately, as somebody who's a free speech advocate, the idea of censorship ruffles my feathers quite a bit, particularly in this case where you have a really anti-Chinese action here, and it really would be better if the government just said, we don't like China, so we're just going to hurt China in the exact same way I'm sure China has hurt American companies over and over again. I've seen it happen with their kinds of bans and rules and regulations. But it is censorship, and it's definitely a censorship that is taking away the right of freedom of expression as far as people in the United States who would want to express themselves on a Chinese-owned service like TikTok, either ignorant of or actively knowing that maybe that information is going to Chinese servers that they're going to try and use to manipulate you, and that with the TikTok algorithm they may try and put propaganda in front of your face. Inherently, part of the idea of freedom of speech, though, is that you're allowing adults to see propaganda from other countries and even lies from other people. Like, governments really can't ever become the arbitrators of truth because they constantly are lying to either other people or their own citizens. But as far as this TikTok ban, the way it's written here, we see a comment here, it'll be worse than the Patriot Act, from what I hear, is incredibly terrible. They're calling it the Restrict Act, and it, from what I've heard, gives the government the legal right to monitor all devices, like everywhere. So it's a spy act, and that they're just trying to sneak it through like it's a banned TikTok act. At least that's how they're writing it. And any activity not approved by them will result in a $250,000 fine and up to 10 years in federal prison, including using a VPN to potentially get around any blocking that is imposed as far as TikTok in the United States. And that, when you see it written like that, or when you hear it is written like that, then that definitely does not feel like a law for the land of the free or a free country. That you could go be thrown into jail or fined, even as a corporation or as an individual. They're definitely trying to push back on this and go, oh, well, we'd only use this against corporations. But yeah, right. If that was the truth, then why not write it that way? And you can't put a corporation in jail for 10 years for 10 years. So obviously it's designed to be used against some individual at some point and is going to be abused, much like the Patriot Act has been probably abused more often than it actually has been legitimately used. The good news here is there's, I think, a lot less hysteria around TikTok, even though they're trying to push for more hysteria. But yeah, this is definitely the kind of law that should not be pushed through, should not be made. The US government has already made its case and done a fine job on that, to say that they don't think TikTok is good. They've done a pretty pathetic case as far as actually showing any evidence that China is up to something at the moment. But I think that's about as much as they should do. And I would highly encourage, if we have any way of influencing politicians, that you call your local senator, your federal senators, your federal representatives, state representatives for the federal level, and try to push them as much as you can to not support the Restrict Act, because this is definitely something that's going to be a problem. And inherently, I don't think it's actually even naming TikTok. It's using TikTok as a scapegoat, and then very quickly it's going to be this ever-growing list of programs and apps that you can't use. It will be things like Signal that have encrypted end-to-end communication, and it will be things that increase privacy to the point where the government can't spy on you, which they would more than love to ban software like that. And you certainly can't trust anybody to fight on your side in the courts, or the courts decide what the way they should when it comes to the specter of national security. It is very commonplace that all freedom is pushed aside for this vague false promise of national security, of safety. Okay. Let's see. Take this, and then take this. Of course, that's not 100% video game related at the moment, but it certainly could be very much video game related in the future. Because, yeah. Because, yeah, they could certainly ban certain games too. Governments already are trying to argue that the chat features in a lot of video games are being used by criminals so that they could monitor or ban the chat features in video games, and generally they will just, I assume, ban the video game. I probably want to stop playing, like, particularly at the beginning of the month here as far as Yu-Gi-Oh! I could just go on and on and on and keep on playing, trying to get up in ranked, and there definitely is an argument to that, but then also these streams will just get incredibly long. I've covered like 2 topics so far. This guy is constantly swapping out cards, and I'm not sure that there's anything I can do to stop this guy. Yeah, he's just defeated me, even though everything I did there really should have had me succeed, or felt like it should have had me succeed. Of course, that just highlights that there's so many cards that I don't know what those cards were doing. Well, anyways, that gets us a lot of the daily quests done. Not all of them. So we can get some points back. Spell cards, special summoning, and play in solo mode, which we won't do that for like 26 days or so. Okay. Let's see. Censored Gaming, I clicked on the wrong link, but he has a video here as to why the Jury redesign had to be redesigned in Street Fighter V. Jury is this character here. In fairness, I would say, though, while this video is fine, it really fails in the fact that it does not explain why when I watched it. It just simply states that from an interview that is being translated by a fan from Japanese to English, so that translation may be a little off too, that the art producer or one of the people in charge said that some people told them the design was too sexy, and they changed it. It doesn't say why or who said so. Originally, in concept art, she was going to be this biker chick in leather that had a lot of skin exposed. Let's see if I can find the exact image. There's a little bit of a better example here. Like, both in the final version you have this latex leather. Also, her inner thighs were exposed more too, which honestly, if she's supposed to be more of a biker chick, having your inner thighs exposed and your chest exposed is really just a great way to get major burns, either through the sunburns or through having your thighs right next to the hot. Alright, here's a, see if we can pause here. And can we get the screen to go away? Nope. Anyway, so here's, and I know this is blurred a little bit, so sorry for that. Here's her inner thighs being exposed and her chest being exposed. Here you can see chest and inner thighs being exposed if I turn off the closed captions. Here. And then here's the final product. Which, in all fairness, too, it's not that strange for a character design to be shown in the art book and it be different. It to be more of a cheesecake lewd design that the artist starts with, and then eventually through the collaborative process and through the censorship process of just saying, hey, we're actually targeting teen plus on Street Fighter 15, not mature, so let's scale that down. I wouldn't be surprised if there is a skin that is officially sold for Street Fighter 5 that does go back to something this lewd for Jury. And in particular, Jury being a new character, I bet they'll try and make her as appealing as possible, as far as they can get away with that. Let's see. Fix that. There, make sure the blur is working. As far as like Ashley in Resident Evil 5, I talked about how there was a thick mod that I saw that was already out that put Ashley in like black leather fetish gear. Well, now I have seen a full nude mod for Ashley is out. So if you wanted Ashley to potentially run around completely naked, that mod is now available throughout the entirety of the game. Oddly, I kind of still feel like there should be a face mod for Ashley and Leon. I think that's an issue. And see, I think her original outfit is actually in the game from Capcom itself, so once you've beaten the game once, potentially you unlock new outfits, that would be my guess, or maybe it's DLC or something. But the skirt outfit, I think for the most part, is actually in the game. I'm not sure if the red dress for Ada Wong is in the game, though, as an outfit. And ironically, with Resident Evil 4 coming out, I have seen a lot more Cheesecake, mostly their animations, of Claire Redfield from Resident Evil 3. A lot more, like, adult focus on her. So, for some reason, she's become popular again just because Resident Evil in general has become popular again. But I would say mostly it is still Ada Wong that's become the most popular, and there's actually very little focus on Ashley as a character at the moment. She's been played down, so nobody's that interested in her as far as just an object of affection as a anime waifu type girl. Alright, so we're going to go through the Video Games Chronicle articles. This is one of the ones where there may be an April Fool's Day joke, with Platinum Games revealing the next entry in Neo Classic Arcade series. Which, yeah, may be an April Fool's Day joke. Let's see. Final Fantasy XVI's DualSense features have been detailed and the game has gone gold. Some of this is old articles too, but noticeably, I don't have a lot of news articles today, which is fine. If this is a 2-hour stream, that works perfectly well for me. Sega has released a surprise murder mystery game for free. The Murder of Sonic the Hedgehog is now available to download on Steam. I would assume it is still available to download and they didn't take it down. Yeah. So it looks like it's a point and click type April Fool's Day joke, and this is one of the rare exceptions where I would say yes, this is kind of acceptable to do a side story joke game. Unfortunately, the problem with this, even though this is overwhelmingly positive, is the fact that if this is the only thing Sega can do good this year with Sonic, that's a problem, and it's a very high possibility that's what's going to be the case. Sonic Frontiers, I think, came out last year, so we'll kind of excuse that as a 2022 production, and then for 2023 we may get The Murder of Sonic the Hedgehog and nothing else, or we'll get a Sonic movie, which Sega really isn't that involved with, or we'll get Sonic Origins Plus, which adds a little bit of old games to a collection of old games. But yeah, I doubt we're getting Frontiers 2 in 2023, and I doubt we're getting anything new. So it sucks that you can't actually get a good Sonic game, and in this it doesn't feel like you really play Sonic. Inherently, if Sega took a step back and said every year we were going to release one level, maybe one giant level of a Sonic game, the original flat 2D Sonic game, something that looked like this, and it was just a giant maze level that people tried to optimize and do their best on, that'd be great. In a lot of ways, Sonic could be a roguelite where it's just an infinite runner and the entire level generates itself, or it could randomize things. That might work too, to get back to the idea of 2D running levels and the nostalgia that somewhat exists around that. Meanwhile, they also still need to make Sonic Frontiers and 3D levels for the main audience, or the younger audience of Sonic games. This also creates a weird situation. Certainly, if I was a parent with a young kid and I knew they were into the Sonic movie, I don't know if I really want to expose them to the idea of Sonic being murdered or have them play a game called the Murder of Sonic. And inherently, if I have a library searching for the word Sonic to make all the Sonic games show up on my Steam library, this would come up. Or if I just had every Sega game with Sonic in the name coming up. This just does not feel like some kids would be interested in that. But in all fairness, it is an actual game, and it's a free game for April Fool's Day. But I don't know if I really don't think Sega should have just spent the effort that they did to make this on doing something else with Sonic. Let's see. PlayStation will reportedly hold a showcase ahead of the Summer Game Festival. Xbox and Ubisoft are planning to hold the showcases during the previous E3 window. With E3 being canceled now, this is coming from Jeff Grubb, so take it with a grain of salt. Who I guess he is still with Giant Bomb. They call him a journalist. I guess technically he is. I won't deny that from him. I don't think he's a good journalist, but whatever. Devolver Digital. I wonder if we'll get a Devolver Direct now that E3 has been canceled. That is a question. I wonder if we don't see several companies delay or not make announcements now that it isn't being forced on them in a specific time frame around E3. There was inherently a collection of people, which included the former guy who was in charge of Giant Bomb, as far as video game journalists giving out awards for like Best in Show awards around E3. I assume that also is not going to happen. That being said, Jeff Gersman is his name. After being fired from Giant Bomb somehow, has really done nothing with his YouTube channel or his name, so he's lost any prestige he may have technically had. And so I wouldn't be surprised if he's not a member of, he is not invited back to vote on that event show. And those awards in particular around E3 were always very pathetic in that they were basically giving you a sticker or a trophy that you could put on your game while it is on the show floor of E3, but they weren't having a big award show or anything like that. It was extremely far from the Game Awards, where the Game Awards is trying to be like the Emmys. The E3 awards were more like giving out participation trophies, a J.G. Wentworth type award, or J.D. Power. Yeah, J.D. Power is what I'm thinking of. Moving on, the first Super Mario Bros. Movie verdicts are mostly very positive. Those who attended the premiere are sharing their reactions. Yeah, okay, that's good news. Inherently, the Mario Brothers movie should be a good experience. It will make a lot of kids happy to be able to go and watch a Mario movie. Particularly, I wonder how many movies in theaters kids will watch these days. Whereas, while I was a kid, we probably went to the theaters quite a bit. Not a ton, but I almost certainly have seen 30, 50, maybe even 100 movies in theaters. I would think that's the case. Honestly, it may be as low as 6 or 7 movies in the theaters. But I almost wonder that if a lot of kids won't see 0 movies in theaters, because there aren't that many kids' movies out there, and movie theaters are just really expensive. Uh, there was definitely a point where movie theaters were going to be the go-to place to have birthday parties and events, but even that's too expensive for it to really happen. And yeah, if I think about my own childhood, there really weren't that many kids' movies that would have been in the theaters that I would have wanted to see. Yeah, as far as little kids' movies. There was definitely a transition, certainly, when they went to digital projectors over 35 millimeter projectors, too. That opened up the realm of potentially putting a DVD player in the projector and playing direct to DVD type movies or older movies, even though that might technically be illegal. I'm sure plenty of theaters do things like that. But yeah. I probably mostly have seen like PG 13 type movies in the theater when I was a kid, more than kids movies, G, or anything like that. And of course, generations before me would have gone to theaters on a much more frequent basis and seen Looney Tunes that were actually played in theaters. The Looney Tunes that we always think of as like TV cartoons were originally aired before theaters. Bugs Bunny, things like that. Yeah, it is going to be funny, certainly, if the Super Mario Bros. Movie comes out and everybody loves it, and all of the hemming and hawing around Chris Pratt doing bad voice acting doesn't matter one bit. It very possibly won't matter. Moving on, a cheaper 1 terabyte Xbox Series expansion card is on the way, according to Video Games Chronicle. The new expansion card will be significantly cheaper than what Seagate is offering. I saw on Slick Deals that right now you can get the old expansions on a decent discount. Slick Deals also has like a 990 Evo Pro Gen 4 NVMe memory card, not memory card, SSD for a computer on sale at a decent price, which I'd almost pull the trigger on that, except for the fact that it would just be such a hassle to try to copy over the data and reinstall Windows on it. Like, and it's just, ideally I would not want to have to replace my SSD for a faster one without just building a whole new computer, and I ideally won't need to build a new computer for a long while. I'm hoping to potentially skip Windows 11 back to something like Windows 12 that I'm hoping would be a little bit more stable and maybe look a little bit better and have less garbage tied into it. There definitely is an argument that by the time I get around to building a new computer, it will just be SteamOS. I'm not sure how many other softwares I really need to worry about as far as if I was just running a SteamOS to run Steam games. Otherwise, if I did need to build a new computer right now, it would just be another Windows 10 computer. We've got plenty of time before Windows 10 stops being supported. The certification process here around these expansion things for the Xbox Series X has been a terrible mistake in a lot of ways, in that there's just not been a good competition here, in that the original ones are all made by Seagate, and here a Western Digital one is being offered. And I get the idea of them wanting really fast storage for the DirectX storage concept, but compared to the PlayStation 4, where you can put any kind of NVMe mem stick you want in it, and you just potentially are going to pass or fail the speed test that it does when you install an NVMe, is a much better offering. Like, we have not heard stories of a lot of people buying really cheap NVMe memory sticks and putting it in their PlayStation 4 and then failing the speed tests and then complaining because they're failing the speed tests. And inherently, I'm not sure if you really need that much more fast storage in the first place. Like, they seem to be completely skipping over the idea of a slower storage. There's no hard drives for 4 terabytes, 12 terabytes of storage that you would have typically expected. You would have had some split there where you would have 512 gigabytes of very fast storage in an NVMe package, and then you would have 4 to 8 to 6 terabytes of much larger storage. It highlights that we are past the idea of hoarding digital content that much, and it probably also highlights the fact that games update so often anyways. Having a fully downloaded backup of a game on your slow storage is kind of useless, because you're going to have to update the whole game anyways when you go back to play it. It's almost certainly the case too that they're just trying to push the technology too far too fast, and they should probably just allow you to plug in the USB hard drive. I think actually you can plug in a USB hard drive into an Xbox Series X anyways, so you just can't run the games installed off of it, so there's a slower transfer process. The expansion slot, they put too much thought into the Xbox Series X expansion slot, considering it is an afterthought concept anyways. It might as well have not existed, and then this would have at this point been a fine time for them to announce a new version of the Series X with twice as much memory. Instead, just a small refresh. Let's see. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says Capcom's share prices hit an all-time high. I assume this is because of Resident Evil 4 Remake, and has very little to do with either Street Fighter or Devil May Cry, or I assume this is a monster hunting game. Yeah. And I don't think there's really too much more you can really say around that. Yeah, this is after the release of the RE4 Remake, which is great to hear. Only good news around the RE4 Remake. I've still yet to hear anybody say anything really negative about the game. I've yet to see anybody say that it falls apart in the island section at the end. People at this point almost certainly have beaten the whole game at least once and seem fairly satisfied with it. It is kind of sucky that the mercenary mode is going to be DLC, and we have yet to be confirmed that the Separate Ways or Assignment Ada content is coming at all in any kind of remake fashion. And it would be very surprising if there was anything new in the game at all. If anything, I think what they want to do, or what they're best to do at this point, is make sure the rest of what they have to release on RE4 Remake is as good, and then just not touch it, and then move on to the much more challenging aspect of remaking Resident Evil 5. And I have no idea how they're going to do that. Inherently, you need a story with Chris Redfield for Resident Evil 5, and that's about it. You could change the locations away from Africa. That would be crazy. You could get rid of Sheva as a character. That wouldn't be insanely crazy if Sheva showed up for just the first cutscene, then was immediately shot. You get almost certainly away from the idea of co-op gameplay, and they stay consistent with the single player experience that we've had in all the other Resident Evil things. You potentially don't have it set in Africa, so you don't have Chris Redfield as a white guy shooting a bunch of black people. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they changed Resident Evil 5 Remake into something completely different and went in a completely different direction. But wherever they go, they still have to move towards the momentum of Resident Evil 7. And then they have to fix Resident Evil 6 too. So the challenge is there. Unless they just want to ignore 5 and 6 completely, which would be weird. They also ignored Resident Evil 1 as far as remaking it in this whole remake series. Worst case scenario is that Capcom is going to sit on its profits and do nothing and not actually start working on a Resident Evil 5 remake for years and years, and then they're going to hurriedly try to rush out a Resident Evil 5 remake. Moving on. Nintendo and the mobile firm DNA have launched their previously announced joint venture called Nintendo Systems. The two companies formed a subsidiary that will be 80% owned by Nintendo and open up in April. Company's role is to develop and operate the development and operation of systems related to the digital part of Nintendo's business, and planning and development of operations of new services. So that doesn't really mean much of anything. If anything, it might be an indication that Nintendo is effectively handing off almost all of its first-party development to Nintendo Systems, but then why call it Systems? Or it's handing off all development of all of its hardware systems. Systems could mean computer programming systems, like they're making an engine for all Nintendo games to be developed on, or it could mean physical hardware systems. I would think it was physical hardware system that they're handing off DNA to make the Switch 2. But I wouldn't be surprised if it's literally an effort to create a new engine specifically for Nintendo development. It's led by a team of engineers, so it sounds like physical systems. So assuming it's physical systems and that's what these people are in charge of, you have one of two terrible scenarios around this just being started to at this point. It either means that the Nintendo Switch 2, or whatever the Switch 2 would actually be called, has had no work put into it at all up until this point, which is a terrible thought. Although, maybe not the worst thought ever, because it's not too hard for them to potentially look at the Steam Deck and just copy the Steam Deck for the most part, which is what I imagine they will do. Or they're looking to split the systems out again, and they're trying to make a new portable system that would be a Switch 2 and a new console system that would be a home console system, which I don't think that works particularly well for Nintendo if they go back to trying to sell two consoles in a game's life cycle, in a console cycle, because that was a little too much. Inherently, I wouldn't be surprised if this company is being designed to create a way to have better online service, and just that's what they mean by customer support overall. I almost wonder if this isn't them creating a subsidiary in particular so that they can blame the subsidiary if they have Joy-Con drift in the next release of hardware. But yeah, I would have hoped that they were further along, and this really highlights the problem with Nintendo in general, is that Nintendo just doesn't feel like a company that actually does as much as you think they do internally, in that they're now handing over a mobile firm DNA the reins as far as making hardware, and most of Nintendo's games I think are made by third party or second party companies, and not a first party Nintendo team inside of the Nintendo of Japan offices. Nintendo of America is basically just a localization company and advertisement company. They don't actually make any games there, as far as I can tell. Nintendo of Europe, exactly the same thing. Any other subsidiaries of Nintendo outside of Japan, exactly the same thing. So it really does feel like Nintendo of Japan in particular should have actual companies. They should be much closer to what Microsoft is trying to become. Companies that have, where Microsoft has acquired a bunch of companies that can make games for their console. Nintendo should have done that decades ago. It would have made a lot of sense for Nintendo to have acquired, like Atari, when Atari went out of business, or for Nintendo to potentially have acquired Sega when Sega would have been in trouble last. I think that happened potentially some decades ago, and I don't think Sega really was that big of trouble. But it should feel more like Nintendo owns in part or whole. They should probably own Capcom or Atari or Bandai or Square Enix. Any of those companies could have been acquired by Nintendo over the years, and then they could have worked. Or Nintendo could have acquired nobody and simply just hired and opened more offices and had them work on more projects. But Nintendo doesn't really greenlight enough projects, probably because they don't have enough employees that actually can program games. If it at some point became revealed that Nintendo really was just a shell company, in that they claim to have hundreds of employees, but really they only have like 20-30 employees, I wouldn't be 100% surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if it's just like the Japanese mafia, the Yakuza, laundering money through Nintendo, and they just have a shell company with 10 employees there, and the Nintendo's success is fully achieved by them hiring other companies to work in secret under the Nintendo brand, under non-disclosure agreements and things like that. Moving on, in exact opposite type of action, we have Konami opening a new studio in Osaka. The new office aims to continue substantial growth in the next 50 years. Which, okay. It's interesting that it's being opened up in Osaka, and they're calling it a major production center. Osaka, not Tokyo, notably. we may be beginning to see the well, maybe it is in Tokyo. Is Osaka part of Tokyo? As well as its newly opened Osaka Studios, construction work is also underway in Konami's next generation research and development center in Tokyo. Yeah, actually, so it is. There is an office in Tokyo too. We might be seeing a slight increase in more businesses getting it out of Tokyo in Japan, which would be a good move. Everything being in Tokyo is crazy. We have a Jeremiah Moxley on the chat saying hi. Hi. So yeah. That being said, this is Konami that we're talking about. So them opening a new office may not 100% be around making video games, and even if it is focused around making video games now, we've already seen Konami potentially try to pull out of making video games in favor of other industries that are more profitable, and then they almost certainly would do it again. Moving on, Nintendo will fix all Joy-Con drift in the UK and the EEA, which I'm not sure what that is. Even if you're out of warranty, until further notice. I'm not sure what the EEA is. Which is the EU plus Ireland, Liechtenstein, and Norway, the UK, and Switzerland. Noticeably, this is not the United States, this is not Japan. I almost wonder if the Nintendo Systems Company isn't also going to be put in charge of Joy-Con drift repairs in Japan, because they definitely were complaining that people were being too aggressive asking for their Joy-Cons to be repaired, and they were threatening to not repair people and not give the customer service they're probably due because they were being rude. Which what does rude mean, really? Who knows? In some cases it could be legitimate. This person is threatening to kill these employees, that's why we're gonna not repair him or talk to him anymore. Or it could be this person did not say arigato in the right tone in Japanese, and that was rude, or taken to be rude. You definitely don't have freedom of expression if somebody can violate a contract on the grounds that you were being rude, or try to contractually oblige you to be courteous. Noticeably too, United States not getting this service. So almost certainly it was a case where Nintendo saw that the UK and the EEA, which that's a new one to me, were going to force them to fix Joy-Con drifts anyways, due to the better consumer protection laws in those areas compared to the United States. Whereas they're still totally going to try and skirt and repair as few Joy-Con drift issues in the United States, where there's less consumer protection laws. And inherently, it also has to be pointed out, I don't think that they have a system in place that fixes the Joy-Con drift issue permanently. I think they're basically just replacing hardware with hardware, with the exact same hardware, just newer versions of it. I don't think they're getting to a point where they're putting Hall effect sensors in there, which would get rid of Joy-Con drift permanently. That being said, almost certainly, if they were going to release a new version of the Switch, putting Hall effect sensors in the Joy-Cons would make a lot of sense. Even if that's the only thing they change, that would be a good sales point, and it would make them Nintendo, I'm sure, a lot happier because they don't want their name dragged through the mud with the Joy-Con drift issue, which is probably only talked about more often because little kids are causing it to happen by throwing around their Switches and their Joy-Cons more. That being said, it might also be a case that because the height of the analog thumbsticks on the Joy-Cons are so much lower, that is causing the Joy-Con drift a lot faster. Moving on, a new Tekken 8 gameplay trailer stars Asuka Kazama and Leroy Smith. Which, I guess if I cared, I would watch that, but I guess I won't. I'm trying to save some time. Arc 2 has been delayed, and Arc 1 is getting a $40 upgrade that's going to kill off last-gen servers. Sequel will now not arrive until the end of 2024, and yeah, that does not sound like good announcements all around. The current gen upgrade for our Ark Survival Evolved is a paid upgrade. Players who choose not to upgrade will lose some online functionality as the official last gen servers will be switched off. I feel like Ark Survival Evolved always had some kind of fishiness to it as far as just the way they did business, and this yet again feels like just some weird fishiness to it. Looking at this screenshot, this is a screenshot I've seen a lot, and I immediately am just like given the feeling that this feels more like a scam game than a real game. It obviously is somewhat of a real game. People still play it and it still exists, but a lady with a gun on the back of a dinosaur really does seem like some kind of low effort mobile game concept more than a AA console game. There's also just the fishiness in having the actor announced as your big sales point for Ark Survival Advanced 2, and that the graphics here are shown to be too good, likely, for what they really would be. And you would think that they would just sell on the idea of graphics and AI interactions of dinosaurs. But then you have this big twist of a bigger armored dinosaur. You'd think that would be the sales point. But then you have the big twist of this guy. And so you have like new characters for the sequel with, I forget what his name is. I want to say Jason Statham, but I don't think that's actually his name. The guy from Chronicles of Riddick. Actor. Stunt casting, basically. Yep. Suffice it to say, I don't really feel like Ark Survival Evolved has caught my attention for the right reasons. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says Disney Dreamlight Valley's Lion King update has been fully detailed. Patch notes for the Pride of the Valley update were published ahead of this week's launch. I guess you could check that out if you're interested. There's a long list of bug fixes and new content. Not super long lists, though. And then the PlayStation 5 God of War Ragnarok console bundles have been discounted by £40 in the UK. So we've seen that sale. Alright, and then that moves us to Gamatsu articles. Again, some of these might be April Fool's Day announcements, but so far I think we've managed to skip most of those because I think at least Video Games Chronicles was good about not putting those types of posts in their actual news tagged category of actual news. So Gamatsu says Rune Factory 3 Special Gold Memories Edition has been announced for North America. The Murder of Sonic the Hedgehog free murder mystery visual novel is available for PC. It's interesting that it is also PC only as a game. You would have thought that if it is a low effort game, they would have also been able to push it out as an April Fool's Day thing on consoles. That being said, it's probably cost Sega maybe $100 to list it on Steam for free, where it would have probably cost a lot more, tens to $20,000, to list the game as an April Fool's Day joke on the PlayStation Network or the Xbox Network or the Nintendo Switch eShop. I bet it's very much the case that none of those platforms would play along, even with Sega, as far as we want to give this away as a free thing on their storefronts. Yep, here's the guy in a better screenshot. As far as Arc 2 being delayed, nothing really new to say otherwise. Arc Survival Ascended announced for the PS5 and Xbox Series and PC. Survival Ascended is not the sequel, but the paid upgrade to the first game. And there's a list here of changes on Gamatsu if you want to check that out. It's an Unreal Engine 5 remaster of Ark Survival Evolved. That's what they're selling it as. King of Fighters 13 Global Match has been announced for the PS4 and Switch, notably skipping any PS5s or Xboxes or PC. Almost feels like it's maybe a mobile game that instead is being released on low-end console. It may very well be a case that this is just a watered-down version of other King of Fighters games, and you are better off playing King of Fighters, a different King of Fighters game. And this is really flashy. So it's playing at regular speed, right? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I heavily suspect King of Fighters 13 Global Match is a kind of watered down version of a King of Fighters 13 game, specifically for weaker systems. And much like the Street Fighter characters, I have no idea who any of these characters are, really. Certainly I've probably seen some of these characters before. This one seems fairly memorable, but yeah. I guess inherently there is that problem where I would want more characterization and story around fighting games, and fighting games are just never going to be written that way to give me enough backstory. It makes an argument that there probably should be some side games like Telltale games around fighting games, or even Dead or Alive Beach Volleyball was kind of doing a decent job of giving some characterization to the characters while they were goofing around playing volleyball. Moving on, a new Fatal Fury / Garou game adds Terry Bogard, Andy Bogard, and Joe Higashi. Well, seems like they're just making announcements in that case, though, because you have very standard just drawings here, not actual final animations. I assume that's not going to be final animations. King of Fighters 15 DLC character Kim Kapawan launches April 4th. Free DLC character Goenitz has been announced. Seems like there was a SNK in particular presentation in which they announced multiple fighting game announcements, which SNK I think is that company that was mostly known for making fighting games, so that somewhat makes sense, but it certainly doesn't make a lot of sense in modern times that you would just try to have 5 different announcements around 5 different fighting games. Even having 5 different fighting games out in the same year sounds crazy. Moving on, Gamatsu says 1 teaser trailer is available. I guess this 1 period is the name of the game for Mayu Shiina. This is due out in Japan. I assume this is some kind of visual novel. Interestingly, it's tagged as a romance visual novel. Of course, a character teaser trailer like this is probably just going to do a lot of talking, and I don't know if there's really much more that they're going to get from it. Very static images. You can see that there's some fairly young looking moe anime girls here, so this might be a slice of life puppy love style romance story, which you're dating a bunch of different anime girls. But yeah, can't get too much out of that trailer. A game called Dungeons of Aether is coming to the Switch on April 6th, which this one has a Steam page, so let's just check it from the Steam page. It's mostly positive already. The animation here looks fine, it's just not really a style that I think would catch my attention for as long as you probably need it to, considering it looks like a dungeon crawler RPG type game. So yeah, this is a game I'd specifically not bothered to put on the fall list, but I will highlight it, which also makes an argument to potentially make a YouTube short around it. That being said, this came out in February, and anything that came out, I think, before January 1st, 2023, I'm going to have to just assume I already made a YouTube short around and not make duplicate or triplicate YouTube shorts just because a Switch version is coming out. Potentially. A game called Rivals 2 adds Fleet. Steam page also live for Rivals of Aether sequel. So they're working on a sequel also. Tekken 8 has Asuka Kazama and Leroy Smith gameplay trailers. If you want to check those out. I only have about 4 more Gamatsu articles too. Slow weekend, no surprise I guess though. April Fool's Day and all. A Sandland anime movie has a 60-second trailer. I don't know why this would be covered by Gamatsu though, because I don't think Sandland is a video game. If it is, I don't recognize anything like that. Yeah, Sandland is a manga created by Dragon Ball creator Akira Toriyama, and it was originally serialized in Weekly Shonen Jump from May 22nd to August 26th, 2000. So, yeah. This has maybe the smallest amount of... Let's not show this because this is just going to get content ID'd. The smallest of the smallest of connection to video games, in the sense that Akira Toriyama made Dragon Ball, Dragon Ball Z, and that was super popular. Arguably, it's super popular because it was just advertised a lot. And because Dragon Ball Z was super popular, a bunch of video games have been made based on that. Looking at Sandland, it has similar sentimentality and animation style to Dragon Ball. Not really as much Dragon Ball Z, even. Like, if anything, Dragon Ball Z and later Dragon Ball series had to really struggle to justify all the weird characters and aliens in the universe. Yeah, I'm not sure why Gematsu put this in the video game section, that I ended up seeing it. It really doesn't have anything to do with video games. And looking at that trailer, I have to say, this movie doesn't really give me a lot of hope that there ever would be a video game made off of the Sandland series. It just doesn't seem like there's enough characters or variety there. Moving on, Redemption Reapers Physical Edition has been delayed to early July, and a PS5 version has been announced. I'll guess I have to leave it at that. Also, version 1.3 and 1.4 updates have been announced. Noel the Mortal Fates DLC Season 12 is now available for PC. Which, Noel the Mortal Fate is this RPG looking game. Let's see. It's on my wish list and it's overwhelmingly positive, but left to its own decisions, I would have almost certainly said no to this game because of its RPG Maker looking art style, even though actually it doesn't look like it actually was made in RPG Maker. The fact that they're arguing it as DLC seasons is weird, and that they are selling it as separate seasons. It's weird. As far as Season 8, Season 9, Season 11, Season 10 seems to be completely missing. Which that is weird. Also, it's kind of crazy to have a game that you're just constantly adding content to as DLC. The idea of DLC always did make weird case. Season 10 is available here, though. It definitely feels like after you must be making fairly short seasons of whatever you're calling a season for this to already be up to Season 12. It's a game of the bizarre, apparently. Let's see, I guess the question here then would be find the appropriate link to Season 12 and click on that link for YouTube Short. Yeah. And then we'll leave it at that. We have two more Gematsu articles. The quintessential quintuplets, 5 Promises Made with Her, has been announced for the PS4 and Switch. This is yet again a example of a game skipping PC, PlayStation 5, and Xbox. Particularly in Japan, though, that seems like that tends to be the case when you're making a game that's more of a visual novel, something that doesn't need the power of a PS5. And Xboxes are just not popular enough in Japan for one reason or another, so they don't make Xbox versions of games in Japan. And then the last Gematsu article we have for today is Canon Dancer Osman launching April 13th worldwide. This looks like it's a kind of pixely platformer side-scrolling game. I'm not sure it's going. It doesn't seem to say it's going to be released on Steam. And honestly, if I saw a game like this on Steam, I'd probably just dismiss it very quickly. Which I'll almost certainly start doing now as we start to go through the games on Steam. Little Monkey is a Sokoban box pushing game, which, if there's any type of game I could probably curate a way to make less YouTube shorts, a game that's a Sokoban box pushing game probably would be a good one. Surf 5 we'll give a chance to. Crab Champions. Well, is this a multiplayer game? Give that a chance, even though it's almost certainly just a joke game. Brave Archers doesn't look like anything. It is Monday, so there's a possibility that we won't run into too many adult games today. I need to use the blur, but almost certainly we will run into some. Postal Royale. I believe this is the publisher from Postal. It's a single player game though, so it's not a battle royale game. So this is a Postal April Fool's Day game, which I'm heavily leaning towards the idea that I would not ever play the Postal series. Like Postal 1 has a small bit of relevancy, maybe even Postal 2, but really by the time you get to Postal 3 and 4, they're absolute garbage and just have no relevancy at all. Obviously that is why there are 491 reviews right now already, is because there is still some relevancy here around the Postal name. Even the concept of going postal, like postmen going crazy and shooting up the place, has long since been replaced in the United States and in the minds of most people with just shooting sprees that mostly are being done by underage, mentally disturbed kids or otherwise mentally disturbed people in schools, or in a couple of them are done in other places, but mostly it's in schools. Eaten by Darkness. I'll give this a chance too. Is this an adult game? No, but it's only in Japanese. Gecko Episode of Amelia. Looks like it's a visual novel. It's free to play. It's Japanese only. And then there's some DLC for $2.99. So yeah, can't really do anything here around the game that doesn't support English. But generally, it is our first adult game. It is nice to see more Japanese only language games come to Steam, because that means there's more Japanese PC gamers potentially growing the category. This next adult game is called Sinful Soul, and it looks like it's a visual novel that takes place in a bar a lot. Almost every screenshot here is fully clothed, and you get a little cleavage, and then the one image that is showing nudity has a censored bar in front of it, which, okay, that is very much what I've argued for as far as the screenshots, that everything would be YouTube family friendly as far as the screenshots. Like I can actually get away with showing the flat 2D animation style here, which is very helpful to give a general visual feel of what the game is. It is perhaps pretty inconsistent in its art style and character designs too. It's weirdly early access. It's English only. It's $9.99. We'll risk scrolling through the different character designs here. It seems to be a romance visual novel where between three girls. In a lot of ways, though, that definitely feels like that is more quality in an adult game compared to this next adult game, which is called VR Rescue Girls, which seems to be in VR. You pick up these, I would call them still 2D, even though they're in VR and 3D, anime waifu girls, and you're posing them. They're calling them figures, like they're figurines, but yeah, I don't know if you can scale them up to be not figurines, or if they're always figurines. They seem to be somewhat scalable, but still pretty small. But it just doesn't seem like there's too much you can do there. There's like some poses you can switch between, and then there's some clothing you can switch, which may literally just be a toggle on and off of the clothing. And then there's one that says change speed for bouncing jiggle physics. And yeah, it seems like you can flip them over into maybe 2 or 3 poses. That's about it. The game itself for VR Rescue Girls, I don't get the rescue part at all, is $4.49. It says it supports English and Japanese. The problem here is you need VR. Noticeably, though, I would say it is a little surprising that we haven't seen more VR porn games on the Steam, since VR porn is one of the major things that seems to sell VR. So you would think you would see more of that. That being said, it's just incredibly expensive to make VR porn and then sell it to the very small audience of people who have VR headsets that want that. Veil of Dust, a homesteading game. Homesteading in this case being defined as living in a simpler type environment, or living in the past, cowboy times type stuff. I don't think there's enough here to catch my attention, though, and a homesteading game in general is not that interesting. It really just boils down to being a farming sim. I'm definitely not interested in farming sims. Milky animals, I think we can say no to. Jigsaw puzzles, we can definitely say no to. Burning Vengeance. Let's see. Third person shooter. Could easily be an asset flip third person shooter, or it could have something good for it. So I'll give it a chance. Here we have what looks like would be an adult game. It has 18 plus DLC, but it's being sold outside of the adult section of the game. I Am the Exorcist. So you have 3D Chinese CGI Chinese lady. Doesn't seem like it's the character you actually play as, nor does it even really seem like the character you see too often. Looking at these screenshots, it looks pretty bad, really. $7.99 19 cents, English and Chinese. Again, this is probably one of the faux porn games that has very little or no nudity actually in it at all because of Chinese censorship. Let's see. Fish Strong 2, we can say no to. I guess the question here we have yet another adult game called Jury Episode 1 Before the Trial. I wonder if we'll see smaller numbers of games released over the weekend because of April Fool's Day. So this is one of the more 3D CGI Western looking adult games where the 3D models are posed and shown in a visual novel. What's interesting mostly about this is that one of the ladies seems to be in a wheelchair. Otherwise, you just have a large collection of ladies. Noticeably, no nudity screenshots in this either. It'd be interesting if this is the new standard. Well, there is one lady in the bathtub, and being in a bathtub, she is naked. But of like the 20 screenshots, there's one where there's a topless lady and you see side boob, and there's one where lady's in the bathtub and you see nipples and boobs. So it's not really showing a lot. $5.99, English, allegedly full audio. This is going to be one of those visual novel series, which they seem to love to make a ton of them, where they're going to sell you episode after episode after episode for $6. So you're going to end up spending $60 the hard way for adult visual novels that very possibly are barely 2 hours long. I would assume that these games are targeting 2 hours. Interestingly, they are saying they have an adults only rating for the ESRB. I don't suspect that actually is true, but maybe the ESRB is back to letting people rate themselves for digital releases. I doubt it, though. And then we have another adult game here that's more flat 2D anime style. It's showing a male with purple hair, it looks like. And so this is like a gay game where the male's in the forest, and there's like one scene or two scenes where he's being attacked by tentacles. Yes, it's a tentacle BL, as in Boys Love X training simulator. After being toyed with by mysterious tentacles, the main character ends up in a nursery or a bride. Yeah, the title's not in English. We get considerably few like gay games overall on Steam, and in particular from Asian countries. So it's nice to see more variety show up. That being said, it is being sold at a premium for $14.39. It is it's Japanese language only, allegedly full audio. I don't think there's really anything more I can say about it. It doesn't look particularly great. It is going for a very normal looking Japanese guy. It's not super muscly or super extreme in his appearance, which is also a level of diversity that's nice to see, certainly, in that most often when you do see an anime guy, they are drawn fairly effeminate or super muscly, and it gets a little too extreme, unrelatable. And then now that we're finally not talking about adult games, we just get back to the standard garbage that we see over and over again on Steam. And then we're back to adult games. So if anything, I would say this weekend was chock full of adult games being released. This next game is called Monster Girl 1000, which Looks like it's a visual novel with flat 2D characters. That being said, all of the characters are very all over the place visually, and they feel like they were either licensed art or just found art online. Bunch of monster girls of different variety. And honestly, I don't think it is actually a visual novel. I think it's a turn-based RPG game with just a lot of cutscenes for monster girls. Very possibly you are fighting and collecting monster girls in the game. It is $15.29, which is fairly expensive, and it's English only. It says 75 romanceable girls, all with unique appearances, personalities, and stories. 100 plus sex scenes, 30 hours plus of content, pregnancy themed harem with 18 characters, turn-based combat. Yeah, for that price, you're not doing terrible. I think the graphics are still very rough here, but that sounds like a real RPG game for $15. That being said, I can't help but wonder if there isn't just a RPG that already exists where you could add a mod to add monster girls to it, if that's what you wanted to do. Alright, this desktop bowling looks like it might be something as far as a game. I'll give that a chance. Desktop soccer, I think, is getting a little extreme. They have a whole series. Is that the same publisher and developer? Yes. And this also, too, is from the same developer and publisher. Although, in all fairness, this is a collection of mini games from a Japanese summer festival. So I'll give that a chance too. Flooding Steam on April 2nd. Next we have a game called Forgotten Souls, which is free to play as a dating sim visual novel. One of the benefits of doing YouTube Shorts, particularly for free-to-play games, is that you can show off free-to-play games in some way that I really cannot do if I am trying to be a critic and give consumer advice and can only play so many games. So it is interesting, certainly, to have the idea of YouTube Shorts around free-to-play games. In this case, though, I'm going to say no and take this off the follow list because 10,000 words is actually too little. 3 CG arts is way too little. Partial voice acting is too little. And when you look at the screenshots, the backgrounds look exactly the same, and the poses of the characters look exactly the same, so I think there's actually very little content here. Not enough to even bother to check out. And then these games don't even deserve comment because it's just same old. Far too many particle physics on the screen to be actually playable, or just low effort garbage games or asset flip games. Next we have another adult game called Mommy Milkers Miko, which deserves, I think, some credit for at least having a more creative name than most of these. It looks like it is an RPG Maker game, like many RPG Maker games that then has adult content in it. Seems like if you are attacked or you get a sex scene when you are attacked by enemies, so inherently it's one of those games where you might actively be trying to lose instead of win just to see the adult content, and then you would have to save scum from it. It doesn't look like there's too much of a gameplay here, though. It's $10.99, English only. It is using the live 2D system on the animation, so the characters are bouncing backwards and forwards. I'd argue the character isn't particularly interestingly designed, in that the way she's depicted by default, her main depiction, has her head far too small, and she's just in this like kimono outfit, even though she's supposed to be a ninja, so a ninja being in a kimono doesn't make the most sense anyways, instead of ninja garb. Yeah, I just don't think the animation is quite there. The fetish certainly is there. Giant breasts, lactating breasts, those fetishes are fairly popular. Putting it in an RPG Maker game doesn't help anything, though, as tends to be the case. Here we have a deck builder game. Yao Gao. I'm mispronouncing that completely. Yao Gaoi Guy? Yao Guy? Yao Guy? It's probably closer to that. We'll give that a chance. Single player. Next we have another game in the adult section, Soul Survivor. You know what I should potentially do is see if there's some way. I don't know how I would do this, but if I could find out from the page if it was in the adult section and then automatically turn on the blur instead of having to rely on myself to turn on the blur, that would be helpful. But then I would also just accidentally have things blurred for a long time or unblur things. This one, Soul Survivor, really feels like it's 3D CGI characters that have just been asset flipped into a low effort asset flip survival game, zombie survival game. It looks different than most adult games, but it does not look better. It just looks like an asset flip zombie survival game with some nudity in it. It's $15.99 in English only. But visually, as far as each screenshot, it's a real disappointment. And then we have a mostly negative game called Brine Fall, which doesn't catch my attention. And then we have a game called The Thieves, which doesn't catch my attention. And we have a game called The Block That Shoots at You. And what I'm going to do is run to the bathroom for just a brief second. I don't know how much we have left, but it could be 5 minutes or it could be 20 minutes or 2 hours. So better just to go now. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. So the irony here is going to be that we potentially will run out of like 5 more games, and then that'll be the end of the stream anyways, even though I took a break in the middle of it. This Dice Kingdoms, as far as a game, it's very zoomed out, but there is something appealing to this screen in particular, so I'm gonna give it a chance. Sparkle World puzzle doesn't look like much of anything. Spirit Fall might be something. Give that a follow list. Off-Road Mechanic Simulator First Job might really just be a demo of a bigger game, but yeah, it's a prologue. I guess in this ever increasing desire to make less YouTube shorts, better, more relevant YouTube shorts, prologues have to be out. Like it's just not fair or reasonable to take up a time slot with a prologue or demo for a game. So I'm going to say no to that. I also vaguely recall that Off-Road Driving Simulator might be one of the bad simulators. Here we have a kebab simulator game. See, this is April 3rd, but even at that, who's to not say that this was supposed to be an April Fool's Day game? One of the things that I've heard as far as doing a Steam Direct listing is that you have to have a game with a page open for 2 weeks before the fact. So if you were going to make an April Fool's Day listing, it would be spoiled 2 weeks ahead of time, which obviously that was not the case for Sega. There wasn't some kind of secret thing listing that people could have found for 2 weeks around that April Fool's Day game. So, but also almost certainly Steam is not dealing with Sega through the Steam Direct program, and they are actually publishing their games under a different set of rules and a different process. But noticeably, outside of that Sega April Fool's Day game, we aren't really seeing anything that is obviously an April Fool's Day game. So one company, Sega, a giant company, pulled that trick off, and everybody else either put a single tweet out or nothing at all. Some small post somewhere, some joke statement with usually a joke picture. Which, if anything, that just once again highlights that April Fool's, even if people were doing it properly, is just not that satisfactory or useful as far as getting people's attention or making them interested. Here's a game I would almost certainly immediately want to reject, in that it is a boot camp simulator, military simulator, strategy game from the looks of it. And yeah, the idea of gamifying or propagandizing the idea of breaking people down mentally to make them into a soldier is distasteful, certainly in my mind. The game itself looks kind of fine, but yeah, I've never known anybody to really sing the praises of boot camp in particular, or even really known anybody to sing the praises of any military service they did, or military service in general, until they've already been through boot camp and brainwashed, or been through the whole process, or they were pre-brainwashed because their family was in the military and they had just been raised to expect to go in the military. Yeah. I've never heard anybody say, well, I was kind of iffy about joining the military. I was very neutral on it. I joined the military. I went through boot camp. It was a wonderful experience. I served 8 years in the military and I had a wonderful experience, no problems. And now I'm getting veterans benefits that is treating me perfectly well, both for health care and just financial support. I've never heard that story in the United States. Maybe there is some military out there with something like that. There definitely are a lot of countries where it's just like six weeks, 6 months of military training all citizens must do, and then everybody just moves on with their life and never mentions it again. I don't think they sing the praises of that either. Yeah, so I guess on just the propaganda potential there, I'd say no. I did see a thing where they said like 70% of the military in the United States thinks 70% of all of the youth at this point would be overweight uh, and unable to serve because of that. That doesn't mean that they just dismiss you on being unfit for service, though. They usually put those people in fat reducing boot camps for even longer, and they just keep breaking them down physically and mentally until they are starved to death, to a point where, well, not starved to death, but starved to a point where they're at the weight goals. I'm not sure that the weight goals particularly are realistic based on the modern American diet. And at a certain point, you would think the one major goals the military should have is like less physical requirements in general. But yeah, there's definitely a longer conversation certainly to be had about does the U.S. military or any military really need people to do? Do we need people to be able to march and wear 200 pounds of equipment on their back? Or is it more realistic that we just need people to be able to drive trucks or fly drones from the comfort of an air-conditioned computer desk? There's definitely a real question there, certainly. Like the on-the-grounds forces actions are still done quite a bit in the military, when arguably from air bombing runs might be as effective, if not more effective, in many situations. Of course, that may have more civilian casualties than usual if you do from the air bombing runs, but the drone strike concept is cleaner, requires less troops on the ground, and certainly if we got to a point where we have just robot soldiers completely that are replacing all of the standard infantrymen, just your basic grunt work military people, then what does it matter if people are overweight or not? Anyways, that's a side rant that I don't even really care to go into it. We do get a decent amount of military themed games, and I'm not inherently against most of them. Like this game Stug, where you're driving tanks is no real problem. That game Fugu Memories of Steel 2 that's coming out is no real problem with that. This War of Mine is based around a war environment. Mostly I would just be reticent to something that just seemed to propagandize the military too much without being ridiculous or cartoony. Something that's a little too realistic, a little too close to home. Alright, so that was the last of the games that came out on Steam over the weekend. And then we're at the GameDeveloper.com articles. E3 was cancelled. I don't think there's been any new news around that. There is definitely a question as to whether E3 is cancelled forever. It may very well be. It's probably not a big deal. If anything, this might help Las Vegas focus itself more around something else. Like the concept of Las Vegas, or having any people living in the middle of a desert that just doesn't have the water that you really need, or the crops or grass, and just the basic things that you would need to live in that area, was always a crazy idea. And it would be better, frankly, if Las Vegas turned itself into more of a small town that would be the center of solar power generation more than anything. That's their main resource, is that they have a lot of sun. And there is a possibility that you could do some factory development in the middle of a desert nicely, while dust definitely destroys computer chips and things like that. The humidity and lack of moisture in the air might be very helpful in some kinds of fabrication. Probably wouldn't be a crazy place to have a lot of steel production if you wanted to ship the raw materials and melt them in the heat. If the furnaces use less fuel because it's so hot outside, that would probably work too. But the idea of Vegas being the center of entertainment overall, I think, is going to fall apart over the next 100 years. Almost certainly, because people going to gamble somewhere or people going to be entertained somewhere is not a thing that's going to happen in this, and we're seeing the beginnings of that, the tiny little beginnings of that with E3. The idea of people going to see announcements or demos of video games doesn't make any sense anymore. Moving on, I talked about Silent Hill publisher Konami expanding its Osaka studio and raises the base salary of its workers, which that's nice to hear. Although I imagine the base salary of its workers for Konami may have been incredibly low to begin with, so it may very well be a small raise, relatively speaking. Or it could be a fair raise, who knows? It's hard to tell without doing research, and I'm not willing to actually research it. We talked about how the Ark Survival Evolved official servers are going to be switched off when the remaster debuts. There probably are some unofficial servers based on that phrasing that you could still use. Alright, and then we've got some fall list cleanup here. This Disney Classics, Aladdin and the Lion King. I don't know if this is the only way you could get this Aladdin and the Lion King, though. I feel like there was a Sega collection. Users who previously purchased Disney's Aladdin or Disney's Lion King on Steam will receive credit from that purchase toward the Disney Classics Aladdin and Lion King. So it's like they merged two separate games together. Maybe that's what the case. One might expect that it includes both Aladdin and the Lion King, right? Negative. It only includes the Lion King. If you want Aladdin, you have to purchase a separate DLC content pack. Is that true? And see if you get this bundle here. There's another one. I don't see any DLC content pack. Does this have in-app purchases in it? I wonder if they relabeled this at some point. This says February 17th. So that's relatively recent. Interesting. Interesting. Sorry, I'm just reading here. Well, that is a catch-22, certainly, in that it seems like this bundle here only includes the Lion King, and then somehow you have to pay $10, even though it says there is no in-app purchase. Hmm. Hmm. I wonder if this isn't the case where these people had been already purchased the Lion King before, and then that's why. I don't know. It just seems really risky. Really, really risky. I guess the real question here should be to search for a line in the Lion King in general. We have a DDMACC. I don't know what that's supposed to stand for. Says hello on the chat. Right, so if I guess the thing to do here would be to search for Aladdin and see if interestingly there's one game at least spelling Aladdin with only one D. So if we search Aladdin on Steam, we have Aladdin Save the Princess, Disney Classics Aladdin the Lion King, Disney Infinity, Persian Nights 2, the Moonlight Veil. What is that game? It's a hidden object game. Okay. So this one, Disney Save the Princess, is obviously, Aladdin Save the Princess is obviously not a Disney game. Let's see. The Jungle Book and More Aladdin Pack. So there is this DLC here for $9.99. It does put you in this weird situation, certainly, where you might accidentally buy a game seems like a weird situation. I wonder if it comes any better if you come the other direction from it and search for Lion King otherwise. No, there's only one thing that comes up when you search Aladdin or Lion King. So trepidatiously, I guess I have to just say yes to this and put it on the wish list. And it seems to include multiple versions of the game. It's what they're claiming. With a bunch of emulation. Home Museum. It seems to be really making a lot of claims that would almost directly contradict what is being said in the reviews. fact that Disney would do this and not correct this completely. It's kind of crazy. And then I guess the bigger question is, if we were to just search Disney, I own quite a few Disney games and haven't gotten around to trying to play any of them. I wonder if there's this mega pack right now. If I was to buy the rest of these, would be like $60. Not probably the worst way to get the remaining Disney stuff. I feel like there was a game called Disney Classics on here, and it may be easier to try and type that in because we're getting past the Disney games. No, not classics. Collection, the Disney Afternoon Collection. Let's look at that and see what is in there. No, the Afternoon Collection is DuckTales and Darkwing Duck and what are these two? Squirrels. Okay, so as far as flawless cleanup here, I guess trepidatiously I put this on the wish list. Hopefully we wouldn't find out that then the Aladdin DLC here actually is necessary, but this was like released a couple years ago. I almost wonder if it isn't a case where a couple of these games maybe different versions of the game were in the DLC. Maybe not. What's funny though is that it's not even shown as DLC, and it seems like that would have been always the case. See, the only other thing you could do is see if you could find like discussions on this. Let's see. And I don't know how from this page you even get to the discussions page. Let's see, view discussions here. Scam. I bought Aladdin and Lion King, but I'm trying to play it and it tells me I have to pay more. Is it just me? You can play the Sega and Final Cut versions. That's Final Cut. Updated versions with some bug fixes. Press D forward to skip the purchase icon. So it seems like maybe it's just really bad at explaining how to get here. What is included? You don't get the original ROMs, which arguably the better thing to do would be just to get the ROMs and screw Disney. It's not like the people that actually program these games still work for Disney or would get any royalties for these old games. Even if they do still work for Disney, their jobs are not going to be threatened one bit if you did download the ROM. So it does seem to me like maybe there was two different versions of the game, and now there's the newer version does give you all the games, or there is just incredibly poorly designed menus trying to sell you DLC. Noticeably, there's no DLC on the storefront. There's no in-app purchases concept here either. So if there was an in-app purchase or DLC being asked, then I would heavily recommend people should flag this game off of Steam completely. I don't know why I have to click somewhere to see what the curators have to say. I guess these are curators I don't follow. The whole curator concept never went anywhere. As an idea either on Steam. I definitely thought about potentially being a curator myself and trying to have a list of games that I really have played or would improve, but it's just all extra work for something that I just don't think people actually look at, or that would be that helpful. Sure, if I became super popular and I could hire somebody, it would be a nice little side project to give to some employee. This one is rated very positively, so we'll put this on the wish list. But to spend my own time on it, it's just not really worth it. I think we can say no to disinfection just because visually it looks terrible. Plus, it only has 17 reviews. I wish that the curating feature meant something more, potentially that I could get away from Steam and put videos and reviews somewhere else, but yeah, it's not going to happen. It would make a lot of sense, frankly, if you could put up gameplay footage on Steam, and then hopefully there would be less content ID issues. Disguise 6 here we can see is very mixed reviewed at what percentage? 62%, which more is the better for me because I tried to play Disgaea 1 and got nowhere with it, so, and I'm not going to go further down the direction. It would have been, I suppose, nice if Disgaea 6 somehow made the game more palatable to me, but it almost certainly, if they did that, would lose its audience, if it even has an audience. I guess it really doesn't even have an audience at this rate. It's just a really long positional placement strategy RPG game. I like the character designs as standing out as every time I see a Disgaea character, I know it's a Disgaea character, or I can usually guess at least. So there's something to be said around the character designs. It's just that the gameplay smacks against that. It's too long. It almost feels like it would be like a Mario RPG type game, but it doesn't really play that way. It's too slow. Disembowel is mixed, so we can get that off the follow list. Disciples Liberated. Is it out of early access? Yes, is it mostly positive? Dark fantasy RPG game. Yeah, it's good enough to make it to the wish list. I did briefly consider if going back to doing a fall list or wish list cleanup videos as separate videos might be beneficial, and yeah, I think the answer is almost certainly no. This game, Disaster Detective, apparently has only one review on it so far, so it needs more time. And so there's Dirty Vampires, unless I just want to remove it immediately. Dire Wolf Game Room is mixed and irrelevant. which is kind of a shame because a bunch of board games on the shelf is an interesting idea. I assume these are real world board games that maybe you need to buy the DLC to play. I don't recognize any of these games. Raiders of the North Sea, Root, Sagrada, Yellow, and Yancy. Dune Imperium sounds real. Leo. Clank, a deck building adventure, and Clank in Space. It needs a third party account. It's crazy that it's free and it's still only 45% positive. It's a helper app to play tabletop games solo. Steam should recategorize this. The interface is buggy and the UI is poorly designed. The app window was limited to a postage card size window that could not be resized. There's nothing to free to play in this. The only free thing is the companion app for the physical board game Dune Imperium. If you don't have that, don't use the app. It's useless. Okay, well, that means take it off the fall list. And yeah, I almost certainly will never own Doom Imperium. I would like Tabletop Simulator, though, to potentially have a bookshelf where you could put board games up. I assume it doesn't have that already. Let's see, Dire Vengeance here has only 3 reviews. And it looks like a Castlevania game. And yeah. They're all positive reviews, but not that many. There's probably more than enough Castlevania clones out there, though, to not bother to play one that's irrelevant. That being said, yeah, if I became a huge fan of Castlevania games, having this on the fall list might be interesting. However, at that point I probably would just scour the Steam categories of Metroidvania, Castlevania type games, or 2D platformers, possibly, just to find more. So until that happens, until this potential future in which I become obsessed with Castlevania games happens, which that's not really that likely to happen, there's no reason to put this on the wish list. Pencil drawing art style of anthropomorphic dogs. Looks like it's just a visual novel. It's early access from February of 2022. I think at that point it's been in early access too long. It's English and Russian. There might be some Russian propaganda in here, and at this point that's not going to fly. Spirit Fall. We'll give more time to. Wait, was Spirit Fall a flawless cleanup, or was Spirit Fall a thing? I think Spirit Fall was a new game. That's one of the things that I've still run into problems with. Okay. Well, I'll deal with that after the end of the stream. So that's going to be it for this stream. Not a super long one, which is fine. I've got Lego to do and work to do, and just dealing with a mild emergency. So I probably won't accomplish too much between Monday and Wednesday, and then we'll be back streaming on Wednesday, hopefully. So, really, no promises can be made. That's going to be it for the stream, though. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. There's social and support links down below in the description that can be very helpful. And if you want to, and yeah, still trying to learn to just say social and support links are down below. And then I should just say after that sentence, thanks for watching. So, thanks for watching. Have a good evening.